Today, we're talking about a disastrous king, a full-blown rebellion, and a single piece of parchment that would, no joke, go on to change the world. This is the story of King John and the Magna Carta. And I know what you might be thinking. A document from 1215? That's ancient history. Why on earth do we still talk about it? Well, to understand why it's such a big deal, you first have to meet the king who made it all happen by being absolutely terrible at his job. So, on one side, you have King Richard I. You know him, the Lion-Hearted. He's a legendary war hero, a crusader, the kind of king they write stories about. But when he dies in 1199, the crown passes to his younger brother, John. And John, well, he was not his brother. See, back then, a king needed the support of his powerful barons to rule effectively. But John was unpopular from day one, and his constant failures earned him the very unflattering nickname, Lackland. And that nickname, Lackland? Oh boy, did it turn out to be prophetic. His reign got off to a truly awful start. I mean, it's kind of shocking how quickly things went south. When John took power, England held all this important land in France, places like Normandy. Less than 5 years later, he'd lost most of it. Why? Pretty simple, really. His own nobles wouldn't support him. He was a disaster on the battlefield and was losing the kingdom's inheritance. So losing all that land was bad enough, but King John also seemed to have this incredible talent for making enemies. Seriously, he managed to tick off pretty much everyone who mattered. First up, the nobles. All those wars he kept losing cost a fortune. John's solution? Just tax everybody more. He started hitting the powerful lords and rich merchants with heavy taxes to pay for his own military blunders. You can imagine how popular that made him. But hey, why stop with the rich? John made life harder for the common folk, too. He created these harsh new laws that made it nearly impossible for people to hunt for food in the royal forests. In fact, some historians think this is the real story behind the legend of Robin Hood, a hero born out of real anger towards a greedy king. So, he's made the rich and the poor angry. Who's left? Oh, I know. Let's pick a fight with the most powerful institution in all of medieval Europe, the church. John got into a massive fight with the Pope himself, seizing church land and trying to install his own guy as the Archbishop of Canterbury. Now this was a huge blow to daily life. You gotta remember, for people back then, the church was everything. Baptisms, marriages, funerals, the whole rhythm of life revolved around it. So having services cut back was terrifying. It made the king look like an enemy of God himself. The whole thing came to a head in 1209. The Pope just had enough and dropped the ultimate punishment. He excommunicated King John. That means he was officially kicked out of the church. In the eyes of his people, his soul was damned. For a medieval king, this was an absolute catastrophe. So the king is weak, unpopular, and now he's on the outs with the church. The powerful English nobles are looking at all this and thinking, you know what? This is our moment. Things were about to boil over. The tipping point finally came in 1215. John loses yet another battle in France. And what does he do when he gets home? He demands even more tax money to pay for it. For the English lords, that was it, the final straw. The rebellion was incredibly fast. The country's most powerful barons basically said, "We're done with you." They raised an army, they marched on London, and captured the city with almost no fight. All of a sudden, John was trapped in a military standoff he couldn't possibly win. So John couldn't win a fight, and the nobles didn't want a full-blown civil war if they could help it, so they did something else. They decided to negotiate, and what came out of those talks was a document that was nothing short of revolutionary. They called it the Magna Carta, which is just Latin for Great Charter. And let's be clear, this wasn't some philosophical essay on freedom. It was a practical list of demands. It was a group of fed-up barons saying to their king, "You will agree to these terms, or you will no longer be king." But hidden inside that list was a radical idea. For the first time, it was put down in writing that the king was not above the law. Just think about that for a second. The king had to follow the rules too. He couldn't just invent taxes whenever he wanted. He needed permission. And crucially, it guaranteed specific rights. Not just for the barons, but for the church, for townspeople, for all freemen. Now, make no mistake, King John hated this. It was a complete and total humiliation. But with a rebel army sitting in his capital city, what was he going to do? He had no choice. So, in June of 1215, in a meadow called Runnymede, he reluctantly agreed and put his royal seal on the Magna Carta. John actually died just a year later, and the Magna Carta didn't magically fix all of England's problems overnight. But the idea it planted, that a ruler's power must be limited by the law, well, that was a seed that would grow into something incredible. Okay, let's be realistic here. At the time, the charter mostly benefited the powerful lords who wrote it. They definitely got the biggest piece of the pie, but, and this is the key, it also carved out rights for the church, for merchants, and even for ordinary freemen. It set a precedent. It got the ball rolling. And you can trace that precedent right through history. Just 50 years later, England creates a new governing body, a parliament. Centuries later, its core ideas, like the right to a fair trial and limits on government power, directly influence the founding fathers of the United States. It's all over the U.S. Bill of Rights. And today, it's considered a cornerstone of modern democracy around the globe. So that brings us right back to our first question. Why does an 800-year-old document matter? Because it was the first great step on the long road to establishing the rule of law over the rule of one person. It turned a squabble between a bad king and his angry barons into a timeless principle. And it leaves us with a question we are still dealing with today. The law is supposed to apply to everyone. So what happens when those in power decide it doesn't apply to them?